living high, the pressure high, getting worse every day. When the man call you for something, you just know it's another bill. You want in the cell, but you can't take it and have nothing inside your will. Well, every day you feel you want to chuck it, cause it seems you don't have no luck. You got families, plenty friends, but nobody don't give up. Well, everybody go through the struggle. Some people get worse than you. We have some people existing, and they don't have a clue. You can't do this thing without faith. Trusting God and you will be great. Nothing about the way. Hey, hey. You've been young and I can relate. When my burden is overweight. Nothing about the way. Hey, hey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Nation Watch. Today is Sunday, 30th April 2023. We are going to discuss four very important issues today. We're going to be talking about local government election and fraud, the issue of the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Home Affairs, the National Intelligence Security Agency bill, and the recently announced Defense Diplomacy Unit at the Office of the President. With me today in studio is Leader of the Opposition and Leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Mr. Aubrey Norton. Mr. Norton, welcome again to Nation Watch, and I really appreciate your presence here today.
Good morning to all viewing and listening audience, and thanks for having me.
Let's get directly into the meat of the matter. Mr. Norton, local government election 2023, riddled with all sorts of negative circumstances from the word go. There were some deferrals, there were arguments about timeline, there were situations with the extracting of the list being done not in accordance with the law. There were issues of gerrymandering of boundaries of constituencies across the country, with the Minister of Local Government overstepping his legal remit. A number of issues until finally we came to a place where we could say today is nominations day. And on nomination day, we detected a number of fraudulent submissions by the People's Progressive Party. Forged signatures, dead people signing, people outside of the jurisdiction signing, one case of a dead candidate being nominated by his deceased wife, and so on. Where does this put local democracy in Guyana, and what is the opposition's formal position with respect to local government elections 2023 moving forward?
First of all, let me say that we were always aware that the PPP planned illegalities. The fact that the PPP refused to have a clean voters list is in itself an indication that they intend to become involved in illegalities. And let's assume that they don't give a clean voters list. They also refuse biometrics. Now, biometrics would be one of the sure ways of ensuring there is little or no vote impersonation. And to the extent that they do not want biometrics, should be a clear indication that they don't intend good. Now, let us recall that after the 2015 elections, Barajak, they were called for a clean voters list and biometrics. And then when it was coming, then when in government, the APNU, AFC started the process of a clean voters list. The PPP went to court and stopped the process. Of course, it is well known that they were involved in all kinds of illegalities in the 2020 election, notwithstanding the very selective COI that they put in place, while at the same time preventing the election petition from going forward in the way that it should. Having said all of that, it should be obvious to all that the People's Progressive Party does not intend to have free and fair elections. You're aware that we did challenge it in court, and they became involved in trying to rectify it. to some extent, they didn't succeed. And so we are at a point where they proceeded to name a nomination day. And having said that, we're not going to allow the PPP to take over our strongholds, we thought it wise that rather than leaving an open field, we will go to the local government elections to ensure we protect our strongholds and other places that we think should be protected. The PPP with opposition runs amok. You imagine them without. And so we took that position, but we will continue to challenge in the court these local government elections. In fact, I am aware that some filings have been done, and we'll see where they go.
The People's Progressive Party conveniently released the findings of the Commission of Inquiry report into the last regional general elections in an obvious attempt to try to mitigate damages done by the unearthing of these irregularities, these forgeries, and so on. It is widely believed that the COI was a concocted commission, and the timing of the report is, in fact, suspect, as was the setting up of the commission and the commission going to work parallel to the court system. How effective was the Commission of Inquiry, the release of the report, in terms of countering the challenges of the real exposure of fraud?
Well, first of all, let me say that, we never supported the COI. The law says you should go by way of election petition. It was compounded by the fact that when you see who those persons selected for the COI, you know that the people was guaranteeing the outcome they want. And so I don't think at any stage there was going to be any big impact from the COI. I think most Guyanese know it's a political inquiry. It wasn't independent, and therefore their positions were known before. Now, having said that, I think the release of it was interesting. The PPP sought to put up a face that they have made inroads into African Guyanese communities. And so on nomination day, they paid people, they coerced 10-day workers to ensure that they turn up. And they had what appeared to be some amount of support. Now, nomination day itself brought out the reality. In many of these communities where they couldn't find signatures, they signed on behalf of people, which is forgery and should really go to court. I wrote the police commissioner on this matter. We had already reported it to the police, but then he says they're competent policemen, you should go and report it to the police when it was already reported. Then we saw the Elections Commission coming out saying that we should go to a magistrate and there should be a petition. We heard them, but we believe that the illegalities here are glaring. To the extent that Barra Jack Deo, who is not known for decency and responsiveness to people's concern, to the extent that he had to come out and apologize for a dead person signing
For a dead candidate.
Said that, they think they took the illegalities a little too far, and this was unexplainable. Then you had those who sign on behalf of many people. Then you had those who normally use a thumbprint signing. So it is so obvious that the PPP is involved in electoral fraud and preparing the basis to rig the local government elections. It is so obvious. Now they are trying to hide behind a COI report, we reported all of these issues to the police, and we didn't expect the police to act. But then, the PPP began to trump up charges and issues against our supporters. In London, it is known that one of their activists, and he said he was directed to do it, to allege that Sharma Solomon assaulted him or something to the effect. Well, if you look at his size and Sharma's size, it really and truly is a comedy show. Now, unfortunately for him, our supporters turned up at the station, and nobody from the PPP turned up with him. And then I think he felt that, look, they set me up to this, and then they left me on their own. And so I gathered his sign saying he doesn't want a story. Then you have the case of the young lady in East Rheinveld, the penitence area, who alleged that one of her activists harassed her. Now, all of this must be taken in light of the fact that Barra Jack Dew, as General Secretary of the PPP, had put out something which says if anybody is intimidated, they should go to the police. So it is wicked Jack Dew plotting ways and means of terrorizing the APNU. It should be known to Jack Dew that it is virtually impossible to terrorize the APNU. You have trumped up charges against ex-ministers. That would not have stopped us. You have trumped up cybercrime charges. You have trumped up terrorist charges. And so there's little or nothing more that can be done except the regime goes back to executing people. Because people have shown that we are going to stand up to the PPP. They have misused the Ghana police force. It is the reason for which they wanted a commissioner that they have swords of Damocles hanging over his head. And so he would be compelled to do the things that he's doing. Now, the PPP knows full well the role of the commissioner, the present commissioner. They know full well he was fingered and the command at the time when 3 of our people were murdered in Linden. And so they know full well he cannot be an independent person. And so we think strategically what they're trying to do is to use the Guyana police force to intimidate the APNU. We are on to what they're doing, and we will respond to it because we are prepared to deal with the things that are being done by Jack Day and the finale.
You're tuned to Nation Watch. I'm your host, Mervyn Williams. Nation Watch is a production of the People's National Congress Reform, and with me is the leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton, and we're discussing matters of national importance. Mr. Norton, I did say 4 issues, but I want to squeeze in one as we're discussing matters along the lines of legalities and courts and so on. Just want to squeeze this one for a quick comment. There was a recent ruling in the court regarding the challenge by Vice Chairman of the People's National Congress Reform and Vince Roy Jordan regarding the substantive appointment of Chancellor of the Judiciary and Chief Justice. And the learned judge ruled that there has to be some alacrity with respect to the president and leader of the opposition engaging as far as the appointments of these 2 judicial officers is concerned. And she said a few things about the delay. What's your official on this matter?
First of all, we have long said I wrote a letter to President Ali saying to him that I'm prepared to support the confirmation of Janet Cummins, Justice Cummins, as the Chancellor, and Roxanne Wilshire as Chief Justice. And so we're on record. I wish to reaffirm that position. Now, the judge, I think, without saying it, suggested to Irfan Ali that he was contemptuous. When you read what he wrote, he was suggesting that he decides when this will occur. And he operated as if it wasn't a constitutional matter and he had the responsibility to do it. The judges suggested that he should hurtle to do it so that it is done. I will wait and see, but I can reaffirm again our position. We have no problem supporting Justice Cummins, Chancellor, and Roxanne George Wilshire as
Chief Justice.
Chief Justice.
Thank you for clarification on this matter. I'm sure that the public at large would now be a little bit more comforted with regard to these appointments. There are no impediments as far as the opposition leader is concerned with respect to the confirmation of these two officers. Mr. Norton, big news in the press. Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Home Affairs had an encounter with the U.S. authorities at the Miami airport in Florida, U.S. Now, the Ministry of Home Affairs is responsible for a wide, very important number of issues. They're responsible for, among other things, law enforcement and the police, the prisons, the fire service, immigration. The Commissioner of Police, I believe, is the Chief Immigration Officer and responsible for issuance of passports, gun license, driver's license, and among other things, particularly handling requests for extradition. And here is the Home Affairs Ministry's Permanent Secretary being intercepted in the US by US authorities, and according to recent reports, allegedly involved in attempts to launder large sums of United States dollars. What does
The person who recommended removed it. So the president's character is in question. Then the deputy, since the prime minister seems to be peripheral, the deputy, who is in fact the boss, has serious allegations of bribery and corruption against him. He has against him a number of allegations, including a lot of extrajudicial killing during his time. The point I'm making here is that the PPP has always been in conflict with the law. And when they are in power, they do not allow the law to take its course. Let's now turn to the PS. When she was appointed, people raised the question of her qualifications for the job. So obviously she was placed there without the requisite qualifications to be a permanent secretary. And therefore she's compromised from the outset. Now, we are talking about a society that should be democratic. And everything that the PPP does establishes that this society is not democratic. In a democratic society, a permanent secretary is not a political appointee. Permanent secretary is supposed to be a professional who is impartial and not part of a political party. Now you have the PPP saying in the public domain that this person is a party member, and then Jack News stupidly equating this incident by saying we have members of parliament that went to India, and so he separates their private life from their public life. Now, if you are the permanent secretary, you're a public official. When you are a member of parliament, you are elected representative of the people, and it is known that you are a political partisan. So Jack Leo's analogy is a very stupid one. On the one hand, you are supposed to be having a professional who operates independent of political parties. And then first they said she was on private business. And then when the need arises to protect her, they say she's on party business. But we don't care who business she was on. She is the permanent secretary. She is a public officer. More importantly, she's a public officer attached to a critical ministry. I do not believe that the United States will just pluck from the sky her name. The president again stupidly saying it was a routine
secondary
check. Who, as a result of a routine check, gets their visa revoked? These people believe they are talking to children. Now, your visa is revoked. When they are questioning the circumstances, what the government should do is come clean and say why that happened. But then, how do you expect a government that has a large percentage of its people, of its leadership, involved in illegalities, then they are obligated to protect their minions who they use in illegal activity. And so you see them coming to the rescue of the permanent secretary. Now, put aside the politics. In normal circumstance, she would have been interdicted from duty and an investigation will occur. Knowing the People's Progressive Party, there will be no investigation. They will not even take her off the job because it would mean they are putting another person who has information on their illegalities out there. So they prefer to stay with the embarrassment of a permanent secretary being held, handcuffed, and interrogated in the United States on her way to China.
Relieved of a cell phone.
And relieved of her cell phone. And then they expect Guyanese to believe them. For us, it's a clear case of a woman who is in conflict with the law, and she should not continue as permanent secretary. But like I said, birds of a feather flock together, and they will be compelled to protect her and to keep the matter as quiet as they can. But of course, Guyanese have already arrived at their conclusions.
And we have gone full circle as well as far as the Ministry of Home Affairs is concerned. Minister Robeson Ben is reported as having said that he really doesn't care if his visa is revoked. He has not been given any information in that regard, but that the United States is not heaven on earth, and so on. But recall that Commissioner of Police Henry Green had his visa revoked. Minister of Home Affairs Gadraj had his visa revoked. This is not about the minister. This is about Guyana. This is about the Ministry of Home Affairs of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. What are the implications of another Minister of Home Affairs having his visa revoked, were that to be the case?
For the PPP, it would be normal. They know that many of their people are in conflict with the law. The problem is the damage it does to the country. Now, Robeson's Ben comments, I think they are in keeping with Robeson Ben. Robeson Ben, I don't think thinks through what he says. And what is the purpose of saying if America is heaven? The issue is not America and whether it is heaven or not. The issue is if senior public servants are in conflict with the law and are under investigation based on allegations, then action should be taken. In this country, it has become a norm that the police somebody goes and tell the police something about somebody, and they incarcerate them for 72 hours. No crime is established. A lot of times the people are not linked to any crime, but the police is instructed to keep them for 72 hours. However, when there are clear cases of conflict with the law, as is this case, the system protects them. It should be obvious to all that the PPP has no option other than to protect people who are in conflict with the law, because a large majority of the leadership of the PPP is in conflict with the law. And so the most we can do to solve this problem is change the government. And people are watching. People want change. Even when you go into PPP communities, they tell you about the ill treatment they get from lead PPP activists in the community. They tell you about how the police is used against them. And so it is a pattern. But we do believe in the final analysis, the truth will come out and the PPP will be compelled to continue to protect even in the light of facts.
Final quick question on this PS Home Affairs issue. One top government functionary said the permanent secretary was on government business en route to China. Another top government official said that the permanent secretary was on a party training program. Is someone lying, or is there, or is the line that separates party from government being erased, and there's a reemergence of party paramountcy?
Well, I don't know that it is party paramountcy. It's one-man paramountcy. It is obvious that nobody else has a say in the PPP outside of Barra Jack Deo. And therefore, even though other pronouncements would be made, when he comes as the omnipotent, the omnipresent, and omniscient. And so he believes whatever he says, that is it, and the rest will fall in line. But because it is evident that there is no coordination between the president and his boss, Barra Jack Deo, you are finding these cracks that are opening in the system. And so it is very difficult for them to get a unified position because of the nature of the PPP and how Barra Jack Deo directs everything that happens in the PPP. And the minute he isn't directing it, you will have these fissures occurring and it becomes obvious to the public.
We're moving along on Nation Watch today, April 30th, 2023, with Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Aubrey Norton, MP. Mr. Norton, we're moving into the defense diplomacy area. Mr. Ali recently announced the establishment of a defense diplomacy unit, which would operate out of the office of the president. Now, you have a National Defense Board, you have the Joint Services, you have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They obviously make foreign policy down there, or are required to. What does the establishment of this unit and its home being the office of the president mean for both defense diplomacy and international relations?
First of all, he failed to define what is meant by defense diplomacy. Now, as I understand defense diplomacy, is where you use your diplomatic infrastructure in defense of your country. That has always happened. From the time Guyana became independent, we put in place a well-qualified foreign service. No one will doubt that that foreign service defended our territorial integrity and had clear ideas about defense diplomacy. Now, Evan Ali seems to have a penchant for pulling things from the skies and make it appear as if it's new. You know, the classic is, in 2006, we ran in the election as one Guyana. And he comes now and talk about one Guyana like if it is something original to him.
And he was on the other side of the
He was
house.
on the other side criticizing one Guyana.
Yes.
But when you see you lack intellectual capacity, you will make these mistakes. And so, what is it he's calling defense diplomacy? He talks about the establishment of this unit. Mind you, I'm in support of qualified and competent people who retire at 55 getting proper jobs. Have no problem with that. If Bess is qualified and competent, she should get the job. Of course, why you didn't confirm him if he is qualified and competent? I do believe he's qualified and competent, but you didn't confirm him for years. You did it on his last day, and then you're now going to say, we're going to create this unit to put you people. That also is a manifestation of the failure of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If you had a proper minister and a functioning Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there is no need for a defense diplomacy unit in the office of the president. The office of the president got men on a mission that straddling all ministries. You now come in with a defense unit in the office of the president, and you're couching it in language as if it will pursue diplomatic partnerships. Then what is the purpose of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Is it that they're admitting that the Minister of Foreign Affairs is incompetent and he lacks the intellectual sagacity to lead the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? If that is the case, get rid of the minister. In the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you have divisions, and even if you want to create a division, then it should be in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I believe all that he's saying is indicative of the fact that they believe the ministry has failed. They believe the minister has failed. That is one reasoning, that the failure of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is causing it to end up in the office of the president. But then it means the president is failing. If you have a ministry that isn't doing your diplomatic work in defense of this country, then as president, you are a failure. And so all of this talk about defense diplomacy and that it will focus more on plans and a set of garbage, they make no sense. I am all for well-qualified people getting a job post 55. I am all for that. But to come and tell us you are setting up a defense unit, diplomacy defense unit in the Ministry of the Presidency, when you have a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then you have a Ministry of Foreign Affairs that are headed by two ministers, is basically Todd as minister and Robert Prasad as minister by another name. What that speech did was to point out that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has failed, the minister has failed, and by the very token, the government has failed in terms of foreign policy. It should be noted that the very government is the one that destroyed the foreign service over the years. And while under Carl Greenidge, the attempt was made to build it back, and the AP and UFC had gone a far way, we are back to square one with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Guyana has an ongoing court case with respect to the border controversy with Venezuela. Yet, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the government of Guyana, has failed, omitted, or refused to appoint an ambassador to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Our neighbor, Brazil, which is really the peacekeeping force of the South American continent, an emerging world economy, a country that offers support to Guyana and other countries in the region, military and otherwise. Guyana has failed, refused, or omitted to appoint an ambassador to Brazil. But there's this rush to set up this defense diplomacy unit in the office of the president. Comment on the absence of these two ambassadors, the ambassadors to these two countries, in the and this mad rush for this unit in the office of the presidency.
Again, it's incompetence. Look, you don't have to be a foreign policy specialist to know if you have issues with Suriname, you need an ambassador there. If you have a territorial controversy with Venezuela, you need an ambassador there. An ambassador in Venezuela will allow you to engage the diplomatic community in Venezuela, engage the Venezuelan government, but more importantly, it allows you to be on the ground and feel the temperature of Venezuela vis-a-vis Guyana. So you should have one. And then when you turn to Brazil, I think a basic child entering foreign policy knows full well that Brazil is critical to our foreign policy because Brazil is bordered by many countries, and Brazil must have a concern over territorial controversies. And Brazil will see existing borders as sacrosanct.
As they have indeed.
As they have said on many occasions. And therefore, if you do not put an ambassador in Brazil, you are really, how do I put it? It's more than dereliction of duty. You seem not to understand the basics, and you operate in a way that doesn't serve Guyana. One of the things that is the political economy approach to a world. And so, again, it's a manifestation of the incompetence in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And here, not the public, not the officers I'm talking here, but the minister. It's also a manifestation of the incompetence of the president. And for that reason, they have made us more vulnerable. At a time when we are before the World Court, you imagine if the work to deal with the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy wasn't done between 1966 and 1992. And it was the PPP who was formulating foreign policy and implemented, we would have been in a mess, because clearly they do not pay the kind of attention that is needed to foreign policy. Foreign policy has to be structured. You see the president flying here, the VP flying here, you coming back with agreements. I put it in quotation. A proper functioning foreign ministry has technical people that go out They go to meeting, they go to countries, you work out the nitty-gritty of the agreements, and when the president or the minister is going, by that time, you would have already worked out the details, you know where you're headed, and then there is the official signing. There has been a total breakdown in the diplomatic infrastructure in this country.
Moving along on Nation Watch, in our remaining few minutes, just about 15 or 16, Mr. Norton, I want to draw your attention to the National Intelligence Agency and the tabling of the National Intelligence Security Agency Bill 2023. This bill seeks to do a number of things: invasive violation of privacy, basically, and as far as sending spies to foreign countries in Guyana missions abroad. It can obtain information which even the Commissioner of Information will not have any knowledge of. So the leader of the opposition goes through the Commissioner of Information and gets turned down, can't get the information. But this agency, following the passage of this bit of legislation, if it ever sees the light of day, can go and get that information. And many see this bit of legislation as being strategically intended to manipulate, control, direct the lives of citizens and intimidate citizens, not only in Guyana, but external to Guyana. What are your initial reactions to first the tabling of the bill, and then we can discuss the referral to select committee?
Now, first of all, there is need for an intelligence agency in Guyana, and we have one.
Yeah.
We had one on the Granger, we had one before, and we continue to have now. The question then becomes, why this bill? First of all, I believe that a national intelligence agency should be above partisan politics. That's the first point I want to make. Because it has to deal with sensitive intelligence information that if you politicize it, what in fact you're going to do is end up in the realm of dictatorship. Now, serious concerns with the bill. First of all, the president is being made a god in this bill. He appoints the director, he appoints the deputy director, and there is no mechanism for parliamentary oversight. We see already how the PPP directs the police force against its opponents. Now you're going to create an agency in which the head and deputy are political appointees. What that means, you are following the old communist approach to intelligence. Intelligence today has to be done in the context of a democratic framework. Now, what is that framework? First, it should have parliamentary oversight. Second, the appointment should not be by the president. I believe on this occasion, there is need for whoever is to be appointed to be dealt with by the parties in parliament. And a simple 51% should not be used to appoint this person. This is somebody that should have the consent of the people. This is somebody who should operate above partisan politics. And therefore, the process leading to the appointment of that person should be above partisan politics. We'll elaborate more in the select committee whenever it gets there. But we are deeply concerned that this is more a measure aimed at increasing or it is more speeding up of the process to dictatorship rather than focusing on intelligence gathering and giving the state the ability to operate based on proper information. This is coming over as another attempt by the political directorate to control every aspect of the life of the people of Guyana. As it relates to spies overseas, every foreign ministry, as far as I know, should have people who pursue the country's interests overseas. And your diplomatic community and other elements of it can do that work. My big worry is that we are aware that the PPP was sending people into the United States to spy on the Guyanese community there. And that is a concern for us. We have no problem with you doing diplomatic work, etc. But if you're going out there to spy on people and to do some of the things this government is doing, then this bill is questionable and will have to be opposed unless we can have bipartisan agreement. All the political parties, I shouldn't say bipartisan, it is a kind of a disrespect to the small party, but all the parties in the parliament should be involved in terms of arriving at the nature of the unit, the structure of the unit, and the right to hire and fire should not rest with the president and the president alone.
Some people feel that this legislation, this proposed legislation, was Jagdeo's knee-jerk reaction to criticisms by social media activists in another country, one of whom wanted bulletins had been issued for. Now, the referral to this Special Select Committee comes through Mr. Ali, the president. So on the one hand, you have Jagdeo ramrodding this proposed legislation, and on the other hand, you have Ali out of the blue, without any consultation, discussion, expression of opinion by himself, just coming out and say, I have instructed that this thing be referred to Special Select Committee. Is this Ali acting on his own, coming up against Jagdeo, or is it external international forces bringing to bear pressure on the government of Guyana to do the right thing and comply with rule of law practices?
I think it's a combination of a number of things. One, there is an obvious rift between Jagdeo and Irfan Ali. Irfan Ali, as president, has the power, if he wants to utilize it, to deal with Jagdeo. What he does is his business. Now, the international pressure, both local and international pressure building up. Mind you, there are a number of things that happen that force them in a particular direction. One of them is this discovery of fraud. That has affected them badly. And so some of them are trying to be, how do I put it? Some of them are trying to appease. And so you find them making some concession. It's because the local situation and the international situation. Now it is clear that Barra Jagdeo is not interested in a lot of the relationships with the United States. And there are reasons for which he isn't. I think he would want a situation where the companies that come to do infrastructure, etc., are not tied to good governance principles. And therefore that will suit him fine. Irfan, as president, find himself under pressure from the ABCE countries. You are operating a world at present in which the United States sees China as a threat in the Caribbean, and therefore they are upping the ante. Now, China is a powerful actor in the world. What I think needs to be done is for there to be an understanding of the dynamics, and in pursuing our foreign policy, pursue our interests. Now, there is where the difficulty comes with the likes of Barry Jack Dale. Our national interest doesn't matter. What matters for them is the transactions, the corruption. And so, Irfan Ali finds himself in a very difficult position, where on the one hand, he's trying to appear as a good boy, and his boss, his real boss, is a bad boy. Now he has to work his way out of that. I didn't check to see who is the representative of the list of the PPP, but most likely it's Barry Jack Dale. And therefore, Irfan might have found himself in a position where he can't deal with the members of parliament, etc. There are difficulties that come from that. And so I think President Irfan Ali is at a point where he either has to assert himself or will be continue to be seen as a pawn. The present situation is not good for the People's Progressive Party. Forces all around are coming up against them because of the mismanagement of the country, because of the high level of corruption, and because of their authoritarian nature. Businessmen are saying around this country that if the PPP put their hand on Georgetown, they'll crucify many businesses who don't agree with them. And so it's a very complex situation that they're dealing with.
So is this the real reason for the rush to get, in the first place, the National Intelligence Agency bill on the table in the National Assemblies to ensure that that level of control and so on is in place?
On the part of Barry Jack Dale, I think yes. I think the president recognizes that he will bear the blame for whatever happens. And I think he is a little more responsive to international pressure. And so I think he finds himself in a dilemma that on the one hand, Jack Dale wants to rush and put the whole apparatus of dictatorship in place. While he supports a lot of what is happening, the present national and international situation doesn't allow him the flexibility.
2 or 3 minutes comment with respect to the imminent appointment of a new ambassador from the United States to Guyana, please.
I read what is circulating about the ambassador. Simply, all ambassadors, if they're doing their job, they come to pursue their country's interests. It is our task to identify our interests and see where the confluence of interests exists. And where there's a confluence of interests, we work assiduously to pursue those interests with whoever ambassador it is, including the United States ambassador. There are always going to be variance and disagreements. Then you need the skill to navigate those disagreements with your counterparts and ensure that in the final analysis, Guyana's interests are served, our people's interests are served, and we develop a diplomacy that allows Guyana to grow. And you know, I'm on record as saying if Guyana is to grow, the PPP must go. I don't think they're in a position to help Guyana to grow. Oil money might be growing in Guyana, but the governance structure that is needed to grow the people, that is absent. And that is why I notice if Fanadi now talking about a people-centered government after we have outlined in the parliament a clear people-centered approach. I would just want to say to him, you cannot talk about a people-centered approach when most of your budget is going in areas that wouldn't serve the people. Like I recommended in the budget presentation, our key problems at this stage, poverty, high cost of living, have got to be addressed. And while I believe there is need for infrastructural work, there is need for proper balance that allow our people to develop and benefit. And we in the PNU are disposed to ensuring our people benefit based on a proper people-centered strategy.
Mr. Aubrey Norton, MP, Leader of the Opposition, Leader of the People's National Congress Reform, with me here on Nation Watch today, 30th April 2023, discussing 5 really important national issues. And Mr. Norton, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us here at Nation Watch and to bring the citizens of Guyana and further afield up to date with what's happening as far as the office of the Leader of the Opposition is concerned. And I want to thank you once again for
Thanks for having me. And I want to wish your viewing audience all the best and to say to all workers, I hope you have a successful Labor Day tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been your Sunday, 30th April edition of Nation Watch. I'd like to thank you for joining me and for staying with me throughout this program. I look forward to seeing you again next Sunday by God's grace. Until then, be good to yourselves and have a really, really enjoyable Labor Day come tomorrow. Till we meet again, goodbye.